What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host and DC sports fan, Ben Robertson, and on this page, we break down all the biggest headlines surrounding the Washington Wizards. So, as always, make sure you've hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. Drop your comments with any thoughts you might have on the video or anything you want to hear me talk about in the future. Appreciate all of the support here on the page. You guys keep tuning in every single Monday through Friday. Today, I want to talk about which young players are untouchable on the Wizards roster. Then we'll sort of carry that conversation into expectations for Bub Carrington in year two. Next, we'll chat about what is the starting lineup going to look like this coming NBA year. And lastly, I'll throw out a trade idea I've seen for you guys. Let me know in the comments if there's any interest here. Again, appreciate all of the support here on the page. Really, thank you guys for tuning in to Wizards Latest, breaking down everything going on with the Washington Wizards. Three players listed by Scott Conrad of SI as untouchable. We're going to actually start and close out today's show with a couple Scott Conrad articles. Does great work there. First two guys he lists, I think I agree with. The third guy that's listed as untouchable, not so sure he's proved that quite yet. First off, Alex Sarr, the number 2 overall pick from last year. Of course, an inconsistent first year for Sarr. Around the league, I think maybe some disappointment about his rookie season, just looking at the numbers, maybe looking at the percentages. But we, of course, watching the Wizards, know he flashed a ton of potential, a ton of upside, why he was selected with that number 2 overall pick. And, a few years ago, Sarr would have maybe been described as kind of a unicorn like talent, to be quite honest. I realize that term maybe doesn't get thrown around as much anymore when you see guys like Victor Wembanyama at his size and skill set. Maybe he's kind of put an end to that term, if you will. But Sarr again is a player that can run the floor at 7 feet tall, has the ability to dribble the basketball. He has shown he has touch from outside, and then has incredible athleticism, incredible reach, the ability to block shots. I realize, he has to become more consistent. He has to improve his offensive game, but I think we've seen growth from him here this summer. And I just think his upside is really game changing. And if he can ever get there, or get maybe 80% of the way there, he can be one of those guys that's really an X factor in your lineup just based off of his size, again, his athleticism and his fluidity, and then what could be a defensive player of the year like talent on the defensive end of the court. I don't think Sarr can be moved. Fair to be listed as an untouchable. Next guy we'll talk about, Trey Johnson, of course, this year's number 6 overall pick. And while I know Trey hasn't played an NBA game yet, I think there's, all-star, all NBA level potential here. I really, really do. I think his scoring ability is going to translate. I think he flashed it already in Summer League. And I think it's very fair to say Trey Johnson is an untouchable piece at this point here for the Washington Wizards. The third player on this list, I do have maybe a question about whether he is untouchable quite yet, and that's Bub Carrington for me. And look, I've said, I've been on the record, I love a lot about Bub Carrington's game, especially when the shot is going. I think things just kind of click for him when that outside shot, when he's knocking down that 3-point shot in particular, when the jumper isn't falling, things sort of come off the tracks just a little bit. I do think something honestly not talked about a whole bunch with Bub Carrington, something we saw in Summer League. I think his defensive ceiling is probably higher than, again, just what's maybe talked about with him. I think he has the potential to really become an elite defensive guard. I'm not saying he's there yet, but I mean, just with his size and athleticism, we've seen players of sort of that build just be absolute problems and just be able to cause chaos as defensive point guards. And I do think that he sort of fits that mold. The thing for me with Bub is that I'm not sold on he's done enough yet based off last year to maybe claim that he's untouchable quite yet. And I know while you're saying, well, Ben, if he hasn't proved enough yet, well, how have Alex Sarr and Trey Johnson proved enough yet? And well, to be quite honest, on the court in the NBA, they haven't. But I think that stepping into the league right away with Sarr and Johnson, they had an upside and a level of potential that maybe Bub Carrington doesn't have, maybe isn't ever going to have. Again, we've talked about Sarr, just his physical gifts, his physical traits make him a player that again, could be a one point in his career, really an X factor type guy. With Trey Johnson, we've seen him really step into the NBA with an almost unparalleled level of polish to his offensive game. He looks like he's an NBA level scorer already, and Bub just wasn't quite, I don't think, as clean coming into the league. And then also Trey Johnson's shooting ability, that jumper, that outside shot, we don't have questions about from day one of his career in the NBA. Of course, that's something with Bub we still need to see him work on and improve and become more consistent. That's why I'm not sure that Bub Carrington has done quite enough yet to prove or get the untouchable label here on this Wizards roster. Now, with all that being said, I do think Bub Carrington is going to be in the starting lineup this year. And let's talk a little bit about that starting lineup. I think as the season gets a little bit closer, I'll sort of include this into my yearly predictions a little bit more. But for now, the five that I think are going to begin the year in the starting lineup are going to look like this. I think it's going to be Bub Carrington, CJ McCollum, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, and Alex Sarr. So notably, at least for me, there on the bench with that lineup would be Trey Johnson, Cam Whitmore, and Chris Middleton. I think Vucevic and Bagley will, kind of spell Alex Sarr. Maybe even you're gonna. I actually think you definitely will see a good bit of two big lineups. I think they're gonna want to see how Tristan and Sarr can work together a little bit here this year. But I really do think, at least to start the year, again, while I may not love this, Trey Johnson is going to come off the bench. I'm not sure how I love, again, I'm not sure how much I love that just because I want to see him on the court playing as much as possible, getting NBA experience, figuring out where his game fits and where it doesn't. But I just have a hard time seeing the other two guards I listed in the starting lineup going to the bench. With Bub, maybe again, I think the front office and this coaching staff is pretty keyed in on him again, at least beginning of the year as the starting point guard. Maybe if he struggles, maybe you could see some things open up. Maybe CJ McCollum moves over to the point guard role. Maybe Trey Johnson could slide in as the two with CJ and see maybe something like that. But I think Bub's going to start in that point guard role. I think the front office believes in him. Remember, part of that Denny Avdia trade, a big part of it was to get Bub Carrington. And then CJ kind of needs to start because, again, the team is trying to increase his trade value, show to the league what he still has left in the tank. So again, I think for those reasons, Trey Johnson likely getting sent to the bench. Whether I love that or don't, I'm not sure. I think we could see Cam Whitmore play his way into the starting lineup, but I think with Keyshawn and Bilal Coulibaly just kind of being the incumbents, I think at least to begin, they're going to earn the starting roles. Now, I will say, especially in training camp, that kind of position group, those wings are going to be in a battle to earn those starting spots. You could throw Will Riley in that mix as well, to be quite honest. And then you have to find some minutes for Chris Middleton, too. So, really, that wing group just so bunched up. And I'm really curious to see how things shake out there. The last thing I want to throw out, and sort of honestly, kind of going back to the Bub Carrington untouchable conversation, you have to remember at some point down the line, some of these young players are going to get moved, whether you might really like them or not, but someone you like or could see as part of being the future of this Wizards team is eventually going to get moved. I told you we're starting and ending today with Scott Conrad articles. He thinks that Washington should call up the LA Lakers after Austin Reeves has declined his 4-year, $90 million extension with them, currently on a 4-year, $54 million deal. Now, the fourth year of that is a player option that Reeves could decline next year and hit the open market. Sort of the idea, I think probably the reasoning behind him declining that extension. But just looking at the current situation, Conrad kind of thinks or throws out the idea that the Wizards could include some sort of package that includes CJ McCollum and or probably or would have to be one or the other, or Chris Middleton, presumably whoever the Lakers have more interest in. I would guess this would be CJ McCollum. I think his value around the league right now is a little bit higher. It also suggests that the Lakers might send a first round pick swap or a couple second rounders along also in that deal, and maybe an expiring contract like Maxi Kleba to sort of make everything work there. obviously sort of, maybe some rumors that the Lakers want to trade Austin Reeves after he struggled a little bit in their playoff series. The issue with that trade, though, again, Reeves wants to get to free agency next year, and so even if Washington were to trade for him, would still have to come to a contract, or figure out a deal with him at the end of the year. And I'm not really sure the Lakers are going to want to essentially just swap expiring contracts in for an older player in CJ McCollum. I'm not sure if they're going to love that idea. I think it's more likely, really, that with all that cap space that the team has next offseason, they maybe hone in on Austin Reeves and decide to go after him. Remember when Houston went after and signed Fred VanVleet, brought in Dylan Brooks, not moves that maybe made them contenders at the time. VanVleet, $130 million. It was kind of like, does he really deserve that money? But it signaled to the league, hey, we're trying to compete again. We're trying to kind of climb back up in the standings. And of course, then this offseason went all in, traded for Kevin Durant. Of course, Dylan Brooks part of that deal. So I think that's maybe the more likely path for the Wizards coming next offseason. But again, we'll keep you posted on everything Washington Wizards related right here on the page. So make sure you've hit those like and subscribe buttons. Drop your comments on any thoughts you might have on this video or anything you want to hear me talk about in the future. And thanks for watching another episode of Wizards Latest.